Hello there, everyone. We're back for more coding on our game project. I see we have Tass and Squinick in 3 already. Hey there, everybody. Oh. Hello there, everyone. Is audio working now? I reset everything. Oh, hello, everybody. Tass and Squinick and 3 and Oleg and King. Oh, I did a full audio flip for this. I still have to figure out when I need to do that, but I just need to remember to hit the reset buttons just before I start talking. Every now and then, I remember to do that. Oh, hey there, Zell. Let's see. Kitty check here. Ember was just on my lap, but she went to get a drink. Sky is in one of Ember's spots. Sammy and Mason in one of their traditional spots. Yes. The bed is reliable. But yeah, we're heading back in. And I need to figure out what we were doing last. Let's load it up and see if I can remember. One thing I was considering doing is zooming the camera a bit. So the sprite ratio is six times. So these are all 16 by 16 sprites, but they're effectively 96 by 96 as far as the actual screen is concerned. I'm doing that so that their movement can be smooth, so that you don't get the pixel to pixel juddering that you do at 1:1. That's the goal, 3. That this is going to be a Survivor style game. We're just doing architecture at the moment. So we've got decent performance when we've got 300 creatures on the screen. So I think we want to move beyond that ultimately. Let's try... Oh, here. I can just test it. Doop. Overwrite that. Kitties are doing well, King. Kitties are doing well. Probably a good idea, 3. Many people consider food a thing that they like consuming. I was doing a thing. Still going. Yep. Let's open a scene here. Why can I not do remote view here? I know, right, Tess? Oh, that's weird. Oh, okay, that's what happened. Okay, we're gonna force it a moment. Technical difficulties. Why you no obey me? Fine. I can test it's just a matter of time until we're fooding our food. We're doing a lot of verbing of things lately. By lately, I mean over the past couple decades. There we go. Core, game, player zone, body, camera. We're going to do 1.1. We're going to test the ratio there. I want to get it up to 300. Now you'd say you're like you're fooding a sandwich. Maybe 1.5 is too much, but what do you think? How's this look? No, that's the number of blobs. There are 300 of these little guys. So I can do. What I'm hoping is that we don't have a lot of edge here. Well, we can always tweak this. We can always tweak this further. This looks about right. I mean, we get big, chunky pixels, and we get a lot of little dudes on the screen. Can't handle 2,000. I think we can go as high as 500 before the game starts to lose frames. So 300 monsters is a pretty good bet, since if you reach this point, you lose. Oh, well, thank you, Oleg. Been a bit since somebody's used coffee. Coffee's a nice little lightweight donation platform. Meant for things like one-off. So again, thank you very much. Brains. Okay. So I think we're good there. What we'll do is in the script where we graft the camera to them, we'll just set that as the default for now. Oh, yeah, we'll put it in constants. Okay. As an int is equal to 16. Huh. I'll have to fix that, Oleg. So I'm assuming it'll bounce off, huh? No worries there, Tyler. No worries. Is unclear what he's getting at. In sequence, it is no worries that you were, a few minutes after stream start. I mean, maybe he means the shoulder and elbow joints. Six, which means a square width is 96. Then it's a float. We're going to make these floats just in case. You can always cram a float into an int, but an int can't, carry decimals. Okay, so then we go into game script where we are creating a camera. Where did I do that? Ah, here we go. Was camera 2D is equal to camera 2D dot new camera. I think it's zoom to camera constants camera zoom. Okay, that's not the value that I want then. That's weird. That is the link to one of my YouTube videos. Getting camera, but it's not camera zoom. We're just gonna cut that for a moment. We'll go find it. Hey there, Tatum. Welcome. Back in here, we do remote. Look at it again, get the name of the value. Offset. Oh, it is a vector 2D. Womp womp. And we go into game. Zoom. Just so. There we go. Lots of constants. Constants are good. Because I can go in and I can change these instead of having to hunt them in the files. Okay. Got general movement. We've got the idea of logic here. Let's make sure that I have... Get one of these little purple things here. Just gotta find one. Some of the logic is still not perfect. Okay, that's something that I wanted to fix. Is every now and then we're getting an aberration with the movement. You see how some of them are kind of ricocheting back. They should not be changing that target once they get going. We might be able to mitigate that by changing it to just use its target during the... But it's already supposed to be doing that. So it looks like the mice are defaulting to the wrong direction when they lose their initial target, because the mouse is getting some distance from the player before it's reversing direction. Okay, so this was something that I wanted to fix. This was something I wanted to fix. We don't need these samples. Resources. I'm blanking on my whole code structure. You miss a few days and everything falls to pieces. Okay, we Need our movement. Monster, it's not an object, it's not the player, it's not a projectile. Hey there, dudes. Anybody ever play Disgaea? A grid-based strategy game, tactics game. Okay, random direction. Yes. Prinnies, dude. It's hard for me to see the word dude without thinking of Prinnies, the little explosive penguins that are the souls of the damned, essentially. Seeking seeking penitence. I've seen challenges of that kind of thing, Tess. Prinnies can get really strong. You just have to deal with the fact that they have a habit of popping. Okay, we call calculate target. And it will set the direction. The habit of randomly rupturing is something that you might want to get checked with your, with your physician. Even if not fatal, it does seem to be a dangerous condition. There are thresholds that you generally have to cross. Like, different features and such are available at different amounts of like viewership and content posted, that kind of thing. Okay, we get a different direction. We return our local target. But when we move, we just get the target being passed in. Whatever the target passed in is. So we go into our movement object. All right, dudes. Thanks for swinging through. So we reset the body's velocity, and for each movement modifier, we go through call move on it. Body to move, target. And our target is whatever is like constantly being refreshed every time. So we call move, we update the target. Call move, update the target. So the first time we call move, it'll be random direction on the mouse projectiles. And then it will be, I think it'll be face target. Let's double check here. It's movement. Random direction, random mob, face target. Okay. So it's going to do random direction. Then it's going to be random mob. Target, random direction, random mob. So now we come in here. When we calculate target, we initially set it to whatever the local target, or the target coming in is. Then, which I should do this with the random direction. But in any event, then if we don't already have a target object, get the mob count, we get one of them, and if there's a mob to target, we're going to set the target object, and we are going to find out which direction that target is from us. Can do from dot vector, is it direction 2 to do that dot normalized. And back again. That was quick. Okay, so this should only set it when we call calculate target, which should happen a grand total of once. That is when the movement object initially gets instantiated during the movement creation process. Those are 2 of the 5, Harry. The upper one is... that's Mason. That's got to be Mason. Sherbet has a similar color scheme. The angle that you're looking at them from makes it easier or harder to tell which is which. But there's enough of the body coloration to make me think that's Mason. And then the lower one is Sammy. So that should be working. So when is... why is it suddenly changing? Because once this happens once, it's done. Same with target random direction. I don't even think we need this move anymore. Let's verify. Just returns a copy of local target by default. Actually, let's fix that. By default, it just returns target because it's only during the initial calculation that will matter. So then we go into random direction. We don't need move. We don't want to interfere with that. Just like target random mob doesn't need move. Welcome back, 3. Let's find one of the weapon things. I could change it so I don't need to find one of the weapon things, but we want to have that in place for when we get the next function going. We need more for testing purposes. We get enough of these, it'll start clearing space. I think we may have fixed it. Yeah. So local target had an override in it that was out of date. See, now we're not getting the mice, some of the mice suddenly like doubling back when their target is removed. Okay. Excellent. That is fixed. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is work on the concept of injecting new patterns, new movement chunks into a spawner. So let's look at spawner. Let's see where we live right now. Okay. Checking that. So we're calling into the mob factory. We create a body. We add that to our list. Now we do the movement calculation. Do our position modifier. We set up the, I'm sorry, we do a little bit of jittering if they are a mob. This is supposed to be in addition. Actually, that's, yeah, there we go. There we go. I'm trying to remember all the stuff that we were going to do and that I promptly forgot after missing a couple of days of stream. The rotation of, we go into the game. We go into our physics process. Right here, this is actually a problem for our spawn point. So this is us repositioning where the spawner is. And putting it in place. We move the mob survival area, which is the kill zone around the game. And then we set the spawner progress ratio and update the spawner position. But if we don't do this, if this doesn't get updated, then we have a problem. So one thing that we could do is try to get this so that it follows the path properly. Because what we ultimately need to do is we need to get this thing rotating regularly. So I almost think we should update this progress ratio more frequently than we do the physics check. Okay, so we're randomizing it right now. We can come up with something else. What I want to see is if we can avoid having the little duplicates that are appearing so frequently. We've still got one spawning right on top of another one. Oh man, that's 3 of them. Okay. So that's not enough to fix it. We're going to store that. Can try to fix it by having like a eject them out for us. Hey there, crazy. But temporarily. This is our second live. This is our coding stream for the day, Copper. We did our gaming stream a little bit earlier. Hey there, Lek. Welcome, and I appreciate the sub. I'll leave that for you to judge there, Daniel. How about instance square with and hello, I think Korean letters, is that what those are? Okay, somewhere between a full square and 2 full squares. I sometimes have a terrible time with names, so forgive me if I forget now and then. Why do you think this is a girl? Well, I appreciate it, Kim, but like I said, I sometimes forget. Still getting multiples. Still getting multiples. So, might be hard to see the mouse, but down towards the bottom middle of the screen, there are 2 blobs right on top of each other. Wonder if we don't want there to be an intrinsic avoiding force like that. It's happening too frequently, and so far... Hey there, Yuki. Okay, so this is not terribly helping. This was meant to be for when you spawn groups of mob types. But it's not really doing what we want it to do here. We're going to toggle that. Oh, well, that's not supposed to happen at all. Well, I definitely broke something. Oh, because this here is the important part. Oops. Okay, okay. It's moving along, Yuki. It's moving along. Working through bugs. Okay. We're definitely getting, I think, a few more when we don't have that jitter in place, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough. Because we're trying to make it so that they're set, that they're offset, but I think we're getting multiple spawn instances happening close enough to each other that it doesn't matter if we wiggle them. So what we're going to do is we'll do move avoid monster here. So for those that have been watching this for a bit or are wondering what's going on, we have been... what is it? Thinky. We've been doing... yeah, that's the problem there, Tess. I'm fine with them, like moving as if they're like overlapping sprite-wise, but I don't want them stuck to each other like we're getting here. or they only break apart if I move the player sprite right through them. Because it's happening a lot. We do move a void monster. Is it? This should be the vector process for pushing them away from each other. Let's make them shove away from each other harder. Nope. You can see them like ricocheting off of each other more. But that's still not enough. Okay. All right, just for science, we're going to make this a little ridiculous. They should launch at least a full square away from each other every time they collide. These are not colliding then, so there's a problem there. Okay. I think I know some of the problem. Like, I don't mind this bouncing that's happening. Hey there, Chow. If you have a question, fire away. I think it was Kim earlier. It's if I start to recognize the characters in your name, especially if they're not like, you know, U.S. English oriented characters or spellings, I can have an easier time recognizing it. That is a heavy question, 3. And I think the broadest answer is you can't make someone else happy. You can work to be happy yourself, and they can work to be happy themselves. But you can't force them to be happy. Why you stick together? Right. Okay. If we don't have a collision normal, then we're going to invert the raycast target position, which is the edge of our circle. Which is what we're trying to do, is make it move back that much. This should be that the collision is inside, that the vector exists inside the collision zone. How often is this actually firing? Further science. Well, it's definitely not firing. That's part of the problem. Hey there, mafioso. Welcome. We are trying to fix some of our monster collision logic so that they don't stick on top of each other like they're sticking to each other. If they're not stuck to each other, they move properly. All right, 3. So we rotate the raycast, we get the direction, and we multiply them by the radius of the shape of the circle that they have. Everything's collision zone is a circle. Then, so that should get us a raycast that points all the way to the edge of the circle. How about... Let's just... It was weird. Plus... We're going to give it a whole square out from them that they're checking. You can see that they're all staying a square away from each other as they move as best they can, but we're still getting those overlaps. How to test this? I think we're going to have to get into... So right now we are... Our randomization for the position on the circle is based on the spawn position value of the spawner. So every tick, the spawner is saying, I am attached to. Attached to is what? It's a node. But it should be a node 2D. I'm assuming that's pixel. Either way, welcome, welcome. Does this break? Testing, testing. Okay, that's not breaking. Mouse weapon spawner's not broken. Okay, so right now the only thing that is attached is the player position. Let's do a test in the game script. So what we're going to do is for the spawner position, welcome back something. Okay, we're gonna change this. Spawner attached to. That's not how you spell that. I don't know. This is Spawner.attached to is spawner path follow. It's grouped. The spawner path follow should also be a node 2D. I do recall you. Welcome back. And please don't be offended if I don't recognize your name. Sometimes I forget. Okay. We're going to go... Okay, that's still working. We're updating the progress ratio. Now what we want to do is we're going to change the logic for... We're going to wrap... I think we can wrap this. How are we going to wrap this? This is what we want to set. We want this to be different every time we access the position. Now we can override position on a node 2D, but that's risky. Like we could put a getter setter on it. But again, risky. This is a default thing, so overriding it is not a good pattern. Hey there, Mud. Okay, but we've improved this. We've cleaned this up. That's still good. It's... Just making them child nodes doesn't do it. You need to actually tell that node, hey, this is the entity that you're spawning at. We could have it where it's tracking a particular entity, and we could make an entity that has a special position function. And that special position function is that it will return that. But if we tell it to expect a node 2D because it needs position, we're still overriding a default function. We don't know how that could happen, what that will do. We could have a toggle. Like, we could have a series of switches that tell us where should it spawn at. But we would need a way to differentiate that. We could have a get global spawn position that if it doesn't have an entity that it's attached to, that it uses a fixed location in the same vein that we should make spawners. How about if it doesn't have an entity that it uses the global? Okay. Sport. I mean, why would you think otherwise? Math follow 2D, isn't it? See from the game object. Path follow 2D. Oh, var as path follow 2D. I think, again, why would you think not? Now, culturally and socially, is the method of expression something that you are seeing, or something that they are trying to conceal in particular ways? That varies, but I still think yes. And QSD, I mean, I guess more power to you. The fact that you're able to write it makes me doubt it, but you know. Sleepy, I am working on a Vampire Survivors style game. At the moment, I'm trying to set up logic for a global spawn point, a global edge of the screen spawn point, so that I can have a randomized spawn position that is always updating, that getting the position is an act of changing the position each time. So every time something asks for a position, it is adjusted to the next value. Like we always move it. King, that reminds me of the classic, like, demagogue kind of thing. I'm just asking questions. That's what we're doing. I mean, it's not a radius, it's a distance from the edge of the screen out. It's like a rectangle. But that's what we're doing, is radius around player. Like, right now it's a random position, but the problem is I think the spawners are hitting the trigger multiple times somehow. Or the random number is landing at the same point multiple times in a row, resulting in monsters like glued on top of each other. And because they're so overlapped, they aren't triggering like the bounce off of each other logic. Gonna ultimately need some way of detecting a collision with another entity like that, but in the interim. So this is our screen path follow. Might end up putting this somewhere else in the future, but function as a, let's see, it's a vector 2 not how it's going to go, but I'm going to fill that in. They do, but there's at the very least a pop culture, and there are subgroups of people that actively seek to deny that, and to deny that there are particular expressions that people use that are actually expressions of emotion. They very aggressively deny that. But again, they're there. It's that people refuse, you know. Hey there, Jason. Welcome. Position. Positio. Yep. And that's a very cultural thing, King. It's a culture that I would generally advise people not to participate in that fashion. It's not healthy. Okay. So we have our screen edge path follow. What we could do is we could rotate it each time. That still risks a problem. Hey there, Ohio. Well, welcome. You or not, you're welcome. Assuming you're not, as long as you're nice to the community. But in general, everybody's welcome. I always appreciate that. How are we going to do this? So as long as we don't have too many entities spawning at once, we might be able to get away with this. Okay. Our last spawn degree as float is equal to 0. 0. No, just every now and then I feel like I should say that. We did have someone earlier who, I don't know. I don't know what they were getting at. Or at least they were making strange assumptions that I think said as much about them as anything else. Okay. We're going to do this for now. Screen edge on follow dot lookup symbol. It's not really what I want. Oh, okay, we can still do this. Is progress ratio is from 0 to 1. Degree ratio is 0 to 360. So do last degree spawn divided by 360. So that should get us a value. Yes, I am operating on a PC. If you would like to watch in a widescreen format, my channel does run 2 streams simultaneously, one in a widescreen format and one in a phone oriented or like tall ratio. You mean, how do they? The same way they get anything that they're not supposed to have. What makes you think this looks like a girl? Often King. Or somebody else that's not supposed to. Hey there, I think it's Shaq. That is a question for you that will probably answer the question for you, Ohio, is what makes you think I do look like a girl? Is it the hollowed out chest cavity? The broken skin plating? Co-hosts? Do you mean, have I ever had other streamers in like a collab stream? If that's the case, yes, we have. Okami Sky did some Monster Hunter with us and some EDF with us before. Tass, who is one of my mods, has been in streams with me before. Screen edge. Dot position. So then if we go into spawner, and where did we put that? All right, Ohio. This is our culling, our item limit here. You have been in many of my streams, King. Well, here. Let's show off a moment. So there's like... everything is skin. You know, the black is still skin. Droid's gonna droid, folks. Okay, so if where do we update the spawn position? Oh, okay. Okay. Bodies, process. Okay, physics process, we're doing this. Patch 2 is equal to normal. Else is equal to normal. Spawn position is equal to global nodes dot get spawn position. And then if we go into game, don't do it. Oh. Oops. Game. So in game, we need. Ah, okay. Yeah, we can just set that. Can't we? No. So then we go into our game object here. And we're going to take our spawner path follow. A little from column A and a little from column B. I have had formal education on like low-level code practices, your algorithms, data structures, that kind of thing. I've had professional experience, and I've also had kind of self-experience. The code language that we're using for this is GDScript, and this is what our numbers. This is our 31st stream using it. I have not done that yet, King, but I will try to remember to do so. Reminds me. Turn the volume up a little bit. Okay, we have global spawner path follow. I need to make sure that I name it consistently. Global nodes dot screen edge spawn follow. Let's rename it to that. That. Then global nodes, we should have that. So now, okay, every time it spawns, it should shift it by 1 degree. Okay, we still got a double there, but we're getting fewer doubles. Notably fewer doubles. What's causing the doubles? Okay, 360 and 0 are the same thing. Oh, yeah. So every time it wraps around... No, that shouldn't. Because we're starting at 1, and we're only going to sit at 0 once each time. But see, that'll cause part of the problem there, I think. All right, welcome back, William. William, thanks for coming through, King. We're trying to make a Survivor-style game. The thing that we're doing is we're trying to make it so that they spawn off the edge of the screen without overlapping. Let's see if we can very clearly see the thing that I'm talking about. I had some pizza today. So right now you can see they're kind of spiraling in a bit. we have an edge case that can happen, and I think potentially fine with it working that way now. Pepperoni. I had pepperoni pizza today. Okay, we're not getting any doubles right now. That's good enough. We're good enough there. We can make it a little more sporadic by randomizing this value a little bit. Random float. 1, 2, 6. Random float range. There we go. Yeah. That it's increasingly rare what we're getting now. First spawn will always be around here, I think. Yeah. I think we're in good enough territory. Okay. This is a pattern we can work with going forward, though. Constants. Oh. And we'll just use spawn rotation minimum. Instance dot. Does pineapple belong on pizza? I mean, it will depend on ultimately what you consider a pizza, but I know plenty of folks that like it. I can't see it. And given that there is a type, like a category of pizza that intrinsically has that, then I would say yes, it does. Can I do this? We could do that. Will let me? Excellent. Oh. About that. Yeah. Good. Favorite game? Favorite game tends to be something that changes over time. The two ones that I like the most right now are Aiden Chronicles. It's a old school JRPG, like PS1 era styling, but still 2D sprite stuff most of the time. And Helldivers 2. I play a lot of Helldivers 2 right now. Exactly, Jason. Exactly like that. That's what we're shooting for. Hey, they're not. Okay. Right here, you can see a couple of doubles. Like, right next to me is a double. I want that to not be, but we'll leave it as it is for now. we'll come up with some way to mitigate it. I mean, I could try to come up with some sort of like rosette pattern, you know? Like jump across the circle in a ratio that will not repeat, or I'm sorry, repeats, but still hits the entire edge of the circle over the course of it. So you don't get sequence. I've not had a greeting like that before, not. Okay. So we have the general spawning. So the next thing I want to think on, we do have I like relaxing games, though sometimes they are they can be difficult to find. But there are a variety of ones that I like for relaxation of various types. I find sometimes like very actiony violent games can still be relaxing. And hello team and Daniel. The overlaps are way less common now. Let's get some of the projectiles going just to be sure that nothing's broken. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is if we already have the spawner attached to the player right now, what we're going to start doing is we're going to try to create like spawn packages or like upgrade packages to attach to the spawner, because that will be part of the mechanism for upgrading a weapon. Is like right now all we're doing is we're directly changing some of the variables until there are so many of these little mouse projectiles going that it's hitting my limiter. I have an artificial limiter on them. We go to our constants. Do I have that in here yet? I don't. I have an arbitrary one in the spawner. We'll keep it there for now. Yeah, we're only letting there be 200 bullets. We need to be really careful about these limits because you don't want situations where the player's bullets don't spawn. But you don't want so many on the screen that the game lags. This is the balance that we're trying to set. Probably drop that number down a bit. And then bump that number up. We don't need too many objects here. Let's actually bump them both to 300 and see what happens. I'm lurching all around in my objectives, but we're just trying to make things incrementally better as we go. So there can be 300 blobs in existence. We can probably tighten the kill zone a bit, but get a bunch of projectiles going. Kill zone is something that will also adjust over time. There's something a good distance off the screen right now that removes any bullets or blobs that hit it for the purpose of clearing up the mess, essentially. have to come up with some collision handling as well. That's another thought for the future here, like shortly-ish, is that we should have logic for colliding with with something in place. So, like, some projectiles should be able to pierce, some can't, you know? If we use the Vampire Survivors kind of pattern, the lightning bolts don't really pierce. They do damage around them and can hit multiple things, but they only resolve their initial collisions and then they go away. So once they have collided, they will leave, but they can hit multiple targets. So likely they live for one frame kind of thing, or a couple of frames. Don't know how I'll do that, but we'll figure that kind of thing out too. But like, let's say this projectile, you might get the classic, like, it can go through a target, it can go through a target and hit multiple things in a row. Oof. Ooh. The frames just totally went away for a moment there. Oh yeah, we're hitting our limit. So the trick with this one is that the degree rotation is very... we are using physics in frame ticks. So any display is on the is on the processing tick. There are some other things, like right now, this is doing mob spawning on the frame tick, the actual screen render tick. But a lot of the logic in the game is happening at a more fixed heartbeat tick. Got to be careful with how much you do in this. But frame ticks you have to be cautious with frame ticks, because then computer performance can fundamentally alter the way the game behaves. Like, time since last process can be warped, and that can result in weird changes to movement. Things can clip through other things more easily, kind of stuff. But what this should mean is that most of the behavior is controlled outside of this. Let's... I wonder if this could be part of the problem, because these are happening off of each other here. You can. Here, let me, got that in here somewhere. Where is it? Physics. Separate thread. So we have physics happens 60 times a second. We can reduce that. Actually, that would save us some pain. Anyway. Physics ticks per second, max per frame. That kind of thing. Multiple threads, it could be. That's another one you have to be careful with, so that they don't, what would be the word? That you avoid threading race conditions. That if one thread is saying move this one and the other one is saying move that one, it's possible that they could get into conflict with what they're doing. So currently we're spawning the mobs on the physics tick. I don't know if that's really going to help, but... It won't change the frequency of them, but it will make the check more frequent. But yeah, we also don't need 60 physics frames per second, period. We are, in most places, capping it at 6 physics ticks a second. But we could clean that up. Because at 60, that means that if our physics processing is... that's a good thing to check. Debug, monitor... Okay, yeah, we're still good. We would need to get into hundreds of milliseconds before it's really a problem. Yeah, right here. See, every 10th of a second. So we could definitely still use some optimization here. We are spawning them way faster. Like, there are way more projectiles than we should have. Number of projectiles should always be capped so that we don't get into this circumstance. Once it reaches a play-testable or releasable state, then we'll start... Once we approach playtesting and releasable states, we'll start to think about how we're going to do that. Very, very early testing will probably be an executable handed to particular people. But I do hope to make it available on a large scale once we're done. Okay, still not failing. Okay, we just hit a problem state. These are the physics ticks. Oh, wait. We're definitely going to need more optimization here. Yep. It's going to start with a very limited pool of people, and then it will open up and open up as I want some broader testing. Let's... just 10. Oh, wow. Ooh. No, no, no. Okay, yeah, I definitely don't want that. We have 60 frames a second. Well, we want 30. Just leave that. We don't need a full 60 frames per second. Frames, like visual frames, can update more often. That's okay. We are getting more duplicates here, but again, that can be coincidence. I should get some extra HUD elements. Let's get that in place. Game. Will this work? Can a new line work in string here? Oh, wait. That's not how it'll work. Comma. I don't know if they have a constant. Oh well. Sometimes there's a carriage return line feed. The purple things are placeholder things to that I'm using to test the weaponry. By default, the player's going to start with a weapon of some kind, most likely. Or, just for thematic purposes, there will be a simple thing they do to get the first one. Under no opposition kind of thing. And then picking up XP or some mechanism will result in changes or additional weapons. So that's what the purple things are a placeholder for right now, is if you touch one, that happens. Jacked. Player bolt. All right, does this work? Oh, it is. Nice. So that's blobs, purple circles, and the third one will be the little bullets. Not just with that king, but I mean, let's put it this way. Modding is a role with a very large amount of responsibility and power to it, and it is not something that I would consider lightly or casually. Okay, so the third one is the number of bullets. The number of bullets can exceed the limit. That's actually, I think, maybe part of the problem. I know, right, Zell? We're getting there. So the spawn trigger for number of things that can exist can be exceeded if I am spawning multiple at the same time. So with bullets, I can spawn a whole lot at once. So you can see how there's more than 300. 300 is the spawn limit. As long as it's less than 300 when it happens, then it can exceed it. Yeah. Yeah, right there. We hit the 500 mark. As soon as you hit the 500 mark, it tanks. This is our physics processing. And right here is definitely a problem. That's more than 10 times a sec. That's more than a tenth of a second in order to handle physics processing. As soon as that happens, physics processing gets backed up. It's happening a little slower right now because we've got it limited to 30 times a second. And the physics won't do anything for most of these unless at least a tenth of a second has passed. But it should be every time this spawns, we'll get a lurch here. So if we start moving, right there. Okay. But we're still in a territory where I think we're okay, but that's concerning. That's actually really concerning. What that means is that my physics handling and entity handling is still not as good as it could be. At least it could be a lot better. We don't need this anymore. How can we clean this up? So I don't want to have this. I can have other things. To some extent, I don't want to pursue this line of thinking here, King. But it is a matter of somebody being a proven member of the community that I can trust. And most people, even if they're in attendance for a long period of time, don't automatically get that. And there is no criteria or list of things that a person would have to do. It is something that I would make the decision of. Frankly, if a person is requesting that permission, they're probably not going to get it. Welcome back, Ohio. How do we do this? So too much is happening during the physics steps. The spawners are something that I feel like we could job off. Like the actual handling of spawning happening. Each individual spawner. I think the only thing that I might say more than that, Jason, or at least think more than that, is why does this or does this not work? Like, we made a change recently that fixed a lot of collision logic, but thinking on it, it's like, oh, but that shouldn't have fixed it. Why did that fix it? Yeah, this concerns me. There's too much happening during each physics step. How can we break that up? Animation player. Queue free gets rid of a node. We don't want it queue free. we're looking for a generic method to say, do this eventually kind of thing. I have no idea, Ohio. Okay, so it's not this kind of thing. Thread safety checks enabled. It's technically dangerous for me to job that off, to say, hey, spawn all of these at once. But I think that would be fine. What we need to do is find a way to job something. To say, do this when you get a chance. Because we don't care about it happening at the exact moment of the thread happening. We care about it happening steadily. So if it happens at a slightly different millisecond than the physics process ticked, that would give us the opportunity to use some of this time in between the spikes. We're putting too much on each physics tick. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. We're at about an hour 45 in. And we will resume in just a moment. It'll give me an opportunity to quickly look something up anyway. All right, we're back. Still looking this up here. apparently there's a coroutine and wait kind of pattern. So I don't really want to do awaits. I want to, like, at most, I would want to do a yield, but still a bit iffy. Yield wouldn't work. About... calls will be run until there are none left, which means you can defer calls from other deferred calls. Still be run in the current idle time cycle. Not done carefully, this can result in infinite recursion. Yeah, you don't want to call deferred in a deferred in a deferred. All right, let's test that. Copy this first. That, so that we don't have to repair it if it doesn't work. Hello, Sky. Hello. Blobs are approaching. We have a bunch on top of each other, but get a bunch of these bubbles. I might have to go into some of these I might have to look at the concept of groups and count and be very careful with that. Because right now, groups and count are multiplicative on each other. If you increase the group, the number of things that appear are groups times count. So if you increase groups, you get a massive number increase. If the count is already high, and vice versa. So what we're doing right now is we're telling it, do these functions, but when you get to them. So let's look at our monitor. Open right now. Okay, we are getting a more diverse list as far as processing. Right, let's ramp it up. We want to hit 500 things. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a big improvement. We are spawning a few hundred projectiles at once, which should generally not be happening. With only mild hitches to FPS. Yeah. We're just approaching that super high maximum here. Okay, let's... There are a lot of other places that we could do await calls. We have to be careful about trying to get this split into pieces. If we had a package to send, like an existing package to send into a sub-function that did the, like, this whole chunk here, where each group was handled, and then where each mob is handled, we could potentially get good results, but it will result in some oddities as far as things spawning all at once. Like, we might get a little wiggle in there, but it's going to be so fast. Let's... So this actually creates all of the bodies. So now we want to go into each group. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's been added to optimize in Godot that prevents things like jittery motion, especially with sprites. Physics motion is something that there are tricks to get around it. Hey there, Spino. The thing I'm using right here is that the sprites that I display on screen are actually 6 times smaller than what they... I'm sorry. They're 6 times bigger than what they actually are. So this is running at 1080p, but the sprites that you're seeing are... Sorry, the sprites that I'm using are 16 by 16 pixels. They're itty-bitty. But because they've been blown up 6 times... They're 96 by 96 instead. So they look big, and it also looks like they move smoothly because each pixel of the sprite has 6 actual pixels to slide along. And you could expand that further, contract that further, that kind of thing. Okay, if we took... So this is creating the whole count. This creates a wave of them, like X of them all at once. Can we put this in a function by itself? Hey there, Aurora. We're working on further timing optimizations to our code. We're getting it to where we can spawn a few hundred things at once, a couple hundred things, and it's only getting our physics process time to 90 milliseconds, but that's still a lot of time. That's still costing us some frames as it gets higher and higher. We can see right in here. So that's not good. We can't have that yet. We want to be able to hold at about 60 frames per second for as long as possible. We want 60 frames a second to exceed our expected operation limits. Checking something here. Had to check something. Okay, back to it. So we would need to return go through count. We're going to add to mob bodies here. We're doing this whole chunk. And then we're doing it each time. So we could take this, toggle comment, and we're going to all deferred. All mob body group. Okay, so when we do this, each wave of mice that is emitted will be its own call. And will happen off the base physics pulse. Which means we won't get a perfect circle every time. But it should still be pretty good. Because if we can hold it 60 frames a second, it'll be really hard to see it. Because it'll be milliseconds between the processing of them. There's a bubble. Yeah, I think we can tighten the spawn area since we've zoomed in so much. I can probably come up with an algorithm for messing with the spawn area position in proportion to the sprite scaling and the screen zoom. So the third number on the screen, the lower of the numbers, the bottom number, is counting the number of these bullets that go out. What we want to do is, when this spawns, when the bullets go out, we want it to exceed 500. If we aren't losing substantial frames per second, when that happens, we have made progress. Okay, we're up to 81 at each pulse now. Hey there, 87. Okay, we're still getting a hitch here. So pulse soon. Still taking a lot. I'm going to ramp it up to maximum here. We want it to spike over 500. We want to get our worst case scenario here. There we go. Up to 600 at once. So we can see a chunk down below 30 frames a second. And during that spike, it went up to 129 milliseconds. That's too much time. If we're doing that 10 times a second, then we're starting to overflow. We're not getting as many processing frames. We're also getting less time to do graphical update frames. Even though this is happening in another thread, there's still burden on this to keep up with the number of things. Wonder if there's more we can do on that front too. It's in a separate thread. Which one of these? Always returns null, so it can't be a return. But they're also all run at once still. So what we're going to get is we're going to get a surge of behavior right up front here. We're going to leave that code as it is. Like, we're going to leave this as it is because we can always put it back just with that logic there. Now we're going to go into movement. Bird, move with delta. Hey there, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We're trying to do performance improvements. All right, now movement is happening off of the physics tick. We're calling it during the idle tick. Well, during the time between physics processing, but we're setting that queue up during the physics tick. You know what? We're going to save ourselves some time. Item giver. Item giver body. It's interesting. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're still working on the architecture. I do have nice sprites and whatnot for the stuff that I've got, in my opinion. But we've still got a ways to go. So what I've changed here is every time I touch one of these, we should be getting, 50 more mice per pulse. Okay, next pulse shortly. It's another 100. We're going to walk so that we get the frames per second hitch. Let's look at our monitor. Okay, when we spawn that many at once, it still goes overboard. So let's do a refresh here. Can't conceive that we would have that many projectiles active at once. This is one at a time. This is 100 player projectiles at once. And here's 200 at once. Okay. Okay, now we're going to go into our blob spawner and we're going to speed it up. Twice as fast. Or reload it to be sure. You know what? You know what? No. Extra overboard is 100 times faster. We should hit our limit of 300 almost immediately. Yep. Find some bubbles here. Okay, that's 50 at once. 100. 150. 200. Okay. We are stretching the limits if we hit about 500 things on screen at once. But with movement deferred, so that each entity is only triggering its movement off of the physics tick. They're being called in sequence during the idle tick. It's not perfect, but we can see that it's much more distributed. And we're staying above 30 frames a second. We're staying, in relatively nice territory here. Yeah, we're only dipping a little. And that is with constantly recreating blobs in projectiles. There will be the possibility of us storing those off if they get removed, such that we can put them into limbo, essentially, and reuse them, reposition them. Fully clear them out as far as handling. Not bad. It's not bad. Okay. We're pretty optimized there, I think. This doesn't work anymore. Honor. We're going to have to add speed multipliers into this logic here. Because it's the movement template when we're creating the mob. that determines the speed currently. We're going to need to be... What we need to do is we need to be able to get a hold of parts of the spawner template to mess with, as well as parts of the movement template. Movement template handles movement logic and how fast each one of them goes. So that's a packet that can affect it. And then there are packets that affect the spawner. So, how frequently it spawns. In Vampire Survivors terms, the kind of the cast rate kind of thing, like the empty tome, how fast it fires. And then you have count-related things, like how many projectiles. There's a reason that Vampire Survivors caps this very low. And we're seeing that. If I were to cap that limit and say, no matter what, the count in group cannot exceed, say 10 or like +3 kind of thing, then we would have a very controlled operation here. Yeah. So if we look at that limiter, and let's say everything was firing, or generous, like 20 times a second, like 20 objects a second, every single weapon that you had, and you had 6 weapons, you would still just be at 120, which is plenty for us. Okay, so now let's visit the idea of changing elements of the mob to spawn in a spawner. So I have a weapon spawner, and I'm able to identify it. There's some sort of tag on it that says this is the first weapon spawner, or there's a slot or something somewhere that identifies it. I get a hold of it. There are 2 sets of things that can change. There's these, which are the counts. Technically speed multiplier is here, but again, this doesn't do anything. If we look at movement, oh, there is a... Each one of them has their speed multiplier. And where is our movement factory? It's up here somewhere in our globals. So we have a movement modifier factory, which takes that template, and the speed in the template is its default. And movement factory, the template has a speed multiplier. I'm sorry, the whole movement scene, the template that it results from has a speed multiplier, and it will apply that to each one of them. So to make this work, we have to at least recreate... I think we're recreating the whole spawner anytime we mess with it. So we would have a default of this is the item, and then here are the modifying templates to apply to it. Each one of them potentially adding to the movement or adding to the spawner itself. Movement would be the speed and all of that, the number of them, and the way that they are positioned. So all of the mouse ones are firing out in a spread. We haven't made anything other than spread, but the fact that they're being spread out like that is part of the spawner, not the movement logic. The movement logic, each individual projectile is doing that. So this is applied to each projectile. But the grouping of projectiles, like how many, again, the how many of them is part of the grouping, and thus their position as a group is determined during the spawn. So that's the spawner. So we already know, we've already got a test in place that says apply a grouping modifier. But what we need now is a system to handle that. I want a system that takes a package, like a fixed object. So, again, Vampire Survivors terms, you get a particular power up. I get the cast speed power up. How do I keep that? How do I keep track of that in the spawner? How do I attach that to it? So I have a movement modifying template, something that says attach this in this way. General flow is if I look at a projectile right here, it has movement, it has its type, it has what it looks like, it has things that it can collide with, that it wants to avoid colliding with. But overall, its body is set here, and the collision is handled outside of the entity. So, this is what mouse look like. And it has code in it that says, if I collide with something, do this. I want to abstract this out. I think I can do that, but we'll get there. So I have this projectile. It's created after. The thing that matters more is down here. This is the spawner for it. So this is its default. You can't mess with this default. So everything that is part of this default is in place. I can update what I'd like to see is that stuff goes after, for the most part. So this is what it does initially, and now I will add changes to it. Whether you can change the default is a different thing entirely. It's determining which behaviors are intrinsic to the projectile itself, to that particular weapon, and which behaviors are things that are built-in modifiers that you could subsequently remove. At the moment, what it's going to be is that each one of them will have intrinsic behaviors, and then things you can do to try to override them. So, the homing mouse weapon homes in. So it looks in a random direction first. It looks for a mob to target that could be in a completely different direction. It faces that target if it found it, and then it moves in a straight line. And it will do that every time it updates. Well, the two targeting ones don't do anything after the initial assessment. But the mouse always moves towards a target entity in a straight line. So it'll veer off to get them. But that's how it moves. After that, you could have modifiers that change things like an accuracy value or similar. We don't have accuracy yet. But I could put a second homing in there. My filter? Has my audio broken down again? Is it all garbled again? Okay. Want to be sure a common way to tell me that it's broken is people will say robot voice. As it can get kind of jagged and echoey. How we do this? How we do this? How we do? Hmm. 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 Okay. We need a place to store the changes. So a given spawner will have this built into it. But I feel like we need a way to remake that spawner. So we've got a spawner template where we could change like this. Oh, this I think I'm going to use like an interval multiplier or something like that, but we have modifiers for this that get loaded into the template. We have modifiers for position and movement that are part of it. Are we even really using that anymore? The movement modifiers and speed, I mean. We're not. Yeah. Okay, let's clean that up while we're at it. You have gone away. Maybe the movement template should be part of the spawner. Because we have a thing to spawn. It is an entity in and of itself. And right now, when we're spawning it, we attach that movement to it. So look at our mob factory. We create the movement here and attach it. But what if we actually did that separately? We called the movement factory ourselves and attached that after we created it. So in the spawner, we create the mob's body and then we create the movement, and that the spawner knows about the movement modifier. Because we could render out a movement template object. We instantiate the resource and do it. So, right, we create the body, and we've got a mob movement. So we have a mob template here. We pass it to the movement factory, and the movement factory takes that scene and instantiates it. That movement object, which is a movement template. It is a thing. I'm sorry. The movement is a thing. And then the movement template is something we can reference directly. And we instantiate each movement modifier. So we could have movement templates. Can I adjust them? Will it affect all of them steadily? That might be okay, though. If I mess with the core template... Yeah, but that really... If we assume only one instance of a weapon can exist at a time, messing with its template might be okay. think that might be part of the road that we have to go down. A lot of thinking going on. There's a lot of thinking going on. We're at sort of a, what I call it, we're at a hard alteration point to how this needs to work. If the movement template is part of the mob, it divorces it pretty heavily from our ability to alter it. Like, we would have to alter the movement after the fact. We could jam more modifiers in there in whatever sequence we want. Such that I could go into the spawner and say, here is your current load of modifiers. Use them accordingly. And it could iterate through and generate those changes that it would need to make. So, like, we could get movement modifiers and append them. And then recreate it. I think we're going to need to recreate the movement each time we do this. So if we alter it, we have to at least remake the movement. The mob's body, no. Which is, I think, further reason to extract movement from the mob body template and move it over to the spawner template. Because then when I go into a spawner, I can say, I'm going to mess with the movement logic. I'm going to mess with what amounts to the scripting or the behavior of the projectile, but not the projectile itself. There can be modifiers for projectiles that would alter the damage in similar, but that's a change that targets the mob body and tells it you're going to behave different. I'm sorry, your properties are different. You do more damage. You have a different, pretty much things like damage. But that would be targeting the mob body, because then the mob body itself is the thing that collides and would hand off the you're going to get hit by this object kind of thing. Sure. If we capped it at 30 frames a second that it was rendering, I wonder. Being a bit scatterbrained here, folks. Do 60 physics ticks a second. Let's restore that to default. The blobs. There are 11 bubbles in play. We have the weapon with 1. We have 50, 100 projectiles. $200 projectiles. Okay, if we tried to do 60 physics ticks a second, it has a bad time. I think 30 there. There's got to be a place for me to tell it I don't need to run at 60. For those curious, you can see things like it renders an OpenGL. different limiters on it. Working. The limit on threads. That's another thing I need to look at. I've discovered that there might be some default like pathing logic that Godot can use. So there might be something I can use with that, but we'll have to see. Map, shader. Curious, I'm looking to see if there's a spot where we can set like a frames per second limit where it won't exceed it. If we're doing a sprite game, we don't need super high fidelity 120 plus frames a second kind of nonsense. Here we go. Max FPS. It's in the run. No real discernible difference unless you're really staring hard. Okay, we've hit 300 entities. We're sitting at pretty low physics hold. We're at 30 frames per second steady. Good. 200. $300 projectiles at once. They're still getting a frames per second hitch. Let's go for 200, shall we? Yeah, I need to come up with some sort of pseudo-random spawning logic as far as position. Let's go up to 200. One more. We go up to 200 projectiles. Do we still see any hitching? We got a big hiccup earlier, but for the most part, it's wobbling around 30. I think this is a reasonable place to live as far as limiters. If we're getting to the point where there are 300 player projectiles on screen, we probably have a problem. As far as like random particle effects, we might be able to just use shaders. We might be able to do the same thing with the player's effects, is not have them be actual sprites, you know? But that's for another time, perhaps. okay, though. So, oh, well, so what we need to consider for next time is we need to figure out how we want to daisy chain the modifiers. There's the concept of player inventory, and this is good, by the way. I think we've gotten to the point where the physics handling at worst case scenario is reasonable. We are spawning entities like crazy. We still need to work on our let's do another check here. We need to work on our graphics handling as well. So there needs to be a better way to render this stuff that isn't as much of a burden. In theory, we might be able to do something with the sprites that like makes them shared. Like maybe we could use a left-right sprite and have that universal. Like there is one animated sprite for each, for the left and right, and that they all just replicate it. So that each individual one isn't considered its own thing. And each individual one isn't trying to animate by itself. That might be something that would work. It might look weird in that they'd all be bouncing in unison. But that might be a small price to pay kind of thing. Oops. Sitting at 60. Physics processing is okay. I think we could also call the harming logic, like the I collided with logic, deferred as well. Like, get to this when you can. Because thinking on it, there's going to be a bunch of other stuff on the screen too. I'm respawning about 300 things at once. That is a cost. Those 300 things entering existence at once is definitely a cost. Yeah. There's a non-trivial hitch when that happens. So that's another area that we can look at is there a way for visually this to be cooled down? All right. Have to think about that as we head into tomorrow. I think that's a good stopping point, though. We've made substantial improvements. We can keep it at like a few hundred mobs and a few hundred projectiles, assuming they're coming out. Oh, let's do a different test here. Item giver. Spoke too soon. We still got time. We're going to go into the item giver. I'm going to say bullet spawner. And instead of appending the group for the speed multiplier, probably not, Danimal. Spawn interval? Or is it just interval? Spawn interval seconds. equals 9. They get 10% faster each time. Instead of getting larger and larger groups, it will get faster and faster and faster as far as spawning them. But it's only going to spawn one at a time. And it's going to freeze up. Cute. Okay, so this is multiplicative, what it's going to be doing. So it's going to get tangibly faster every time. Well, no, it will. The impact of the 10% reduction will be getting smaller every time, but it'll be non-trivial. Even faster. Get twice as fast as it currently is each time. $300 enemies with something spawning at this pace so far. I mean, it looks pretty cool, doesn't it? I don't think we're ever going to have this, but it's a good sign. It's spawning them so fast that there's a sprite in its default state right on me. We are currently spawning them fast enough that we're sustaining about 130 of the projectiles on the screen at once. We should also add a self-destruct to most player projectiles just in case, so they can't sit still for too long. Okay, holding still. We are firing fast enough that we're sustaining 160. Faster still. I think we might be reaching a practical cap as far as how small the number can really get from a practical impact perspective. Okay, now let's look at our monitor here. Oh, we've got... Oh no, this was the error that we had at the beginning. Be a filter here. Anyway, monitors. Frames per second is holding steady at 60. We are generating a lot of things at once. Nothing's getting orphaned. Our physics is holding at under 40 milliseconds, and we're doing this nonsense. We're getting there. There's a lot going on in this stream that is still physics optimization. But that's because we want to be able to do this kind of nonsense. We want this kind of nonsense to happen. Okay. Next test. Item giver. no matter what, it is going to do... I'm going to remove you. And we're going to just say, every time we do this, we are going to go in and we're going to get that and we're going to attach it. Say for weapon spawner in and spawners.getChildren. Ooh. I think we can do this. We've got a bit of a terminology overlap going on. Okay, what this is going to do is it's going to double that logic up. We're going to add another spawner, a new fresh one, and we're going to have the speed, the spawn interval of all of them. Okay, code did not explode. And again. And again. And again. Now, the reason that this is different is that this is doing the equivalent of adding another weapon to the player. Look at it go. I've got like a wake behind me. It's doing neat stuff. But a good stress test. We are holding consistently at about 300 projectiles. There is a bit of a race condition with the projectile spawn limit. But we have, let's say, 450 entities active in the world at this point. I think it's going well, Sci-Fi. I think we've got a more valid test case going on here. We were running into problems. Made a lot of changes that I don't know that we actually needed now. Okay. Now we're going to go back into movement. We're going to do this. This is back on the physics tick. And then we're going to go into spawner. So we have create mob body group. We are going to decomment this. We're going to comment that. All right, so this is without the deferred calls. So we are currently spawning blobs super fast. It's like upwards of 100 times a second that will let that happen. So as soon as we kill one, it tries to replace it. And again, what we're doing with the projectiles here is that every time I'm touching one of these bubbles, and this is not an end game state kind of thing, every time we touch one of these bubbles, we add another weapon, and we double the speed, the current speed, of every weapon as far as its fire rate. Yeah, okay. I found my actual problem. So the actual problem was not thread safety, or was not thread handling here. It was the fact that I was trying to spawn 200 animated entities at once. That's okay. We can't apparently handle that. We should acknowledge that. But individually spawning this many entities on the screen at once and having them move constantly, pretty straightforward. It doesn't mind this. Like, now we're hitting limits. We are hitting limits. So let's go into our spawner. These are arbitrary limits. We will allow 500 bullets. Okay, that cost us. That does cost us when that happens. But that was just an initial surge when it did the reprocessing. 500 bullets, 50 static things that aren't moving, and a constant influx of more than 50 mobs at a time. And we are only losing, let's say, 20 frames a second at 60 on a 2D game. Now, if these blobs were showing up on the screen more frequently, and we can check that, So we're going to go into the blob and into the mouse, and we are going to do this. Toggle comment. The mice won't go away. And the blobs won't go away. Okay, so at about 800 things, we hit our limit. Let us limit it down again. We're going to stop, and we're going to go into our spawners, and we're going to pop this back down to 300. So this will be 650 maximum entities on screen. All of them animating, all of them moving and colliding. This will start to add up quick because the mice won't go away. Now there's going to be some fluctuation in the numbers as I run around touching these bubbles because I have to remove a bubble to do it. But additionally, if they hit the edge of the safety zone. All right. We have over 600 things on the screen right now. And it is costing us, what? Nothing. Nothing. Okay. What this tells me is that the count in group logic needs to be handled very, very carefully. Science continues. Science continues. I'm feeling good about this. We're in the zone. Let's go. Let's go. We're going to go into our spawner template for the mouse. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set count equals to, let's say 4. This is a 10. 10 mice at once. Same logic though. 10 mice at once. So it'll still try to limit it at 300. We're going to get at most 310 mice on the screen. Blobs are still spawning one at a time. Outside of very special scripted circumstances, that should be true of monsters in general. we're going to run towards the edge of the screen here to start scraping monsters off. As we get towards the edge of the screen, it needs to spawn them more at a time. So we are seeing it spike over the 300 limit here. Every spawner, every weapon that we attach to ourselves is another potential burden, because the number that can spawn at once. So what we want to do is we want to keep the number that we spawn at the exact same time as low as possible, and try to make it so it happens in rapid succession. We could potentially do this with all of the spawners, right down to the smallest limit, but we'd have to figure out a way to defer it. Hey there, Drew. We're running up to the line here because we're trying to test stuff. But right now, we're able to hold at over 600 things on the screen at once. Look at that. Well, in existence at once, I should say. Yeah. We're sitting at like 650. A little over 700, and it starts to have problems still. But this is that many on-screen animating. If we look at our monitor, we're able to hold steady over 50 frames a second. And it's our physics processing ticks are still below 60 milliseconds. Like, worst case, below 60. Now, I had the privilege, Drew, of, in order to try to prevent the need to remove wisdom teeth, cut out my 12-year molars, which was fun and exciting. I mean, the wisdom teeth came in fine. But yeah, that was like early teens, I think. 12-year molars, but still. But yeah, dentistry. And I'm liking this. I'm liking this. We have made progress today. Isn't it glorious? Feels good. Okay, let's make sure we put that back so we don't forget. And we're gonna replace that. We're gonna go in the blob body, and we're going to put that back. One final test for the night. All right, so again, blobs are spawning upwards of 100 times a second. Every time I touch a purple bubble right now, it is adding a weapon that spawns 10 mice at once, as well as having the interval doubling the fire rate of every weapon I've got. Right now, if a projectile hits an enemy, they both go away. So right now, we are holding steady at about, 180 blobs and about 300 projectiles at once. Those are hard limits that I've put into the game. Well, into the testing version of the game. I don't want that kind of limit in place in actual gameplay. But this is a stress circumstance. There's no reason that these things should be this numerous in this fashion. Hey there, Wolf. Doing our kind of end state assessment here. So we could add a projectile lifespan, and we could tighten the edges of the screen. Because now, if I stand right about in the middle, excuse me, we have 7 squares left and right, and a little over ourselves right in the middle. Let's say 4 squares up and down. That would be urban exploration then, Wolf? Wandering around looking at stuff? Okay, what else can we do? I think tightening the kill zone and tightening the spawn zone. So we would want them to appear within, let's say, 8 blocks on left and right. I mean, whether it was a ghost or not, there are some circumstances where a lot of people do encounter things that are incredibly unnerving. Like, even if it's just an empty room or something like that, there are particular experiences and feelings that, with reason or not, is creepy as all get out. Still a bit foggy from the anesthetic, huh, Drew? Yeah, okay, let's try to tighten this down. Real quick jot a note. Here. I'll have to get back. Not yet, Lunar. So we have 4 up and down, then 7 left and right. Those are out from the center square. Okay, Drew. Thanks for swinging through. Okay, so let's look at our kill zone and our spawn zone. So if we look at game here, gotta find game and then we'll look at it. So not a problem at all, Drew. Life's gonna happen, and that's a particular kind of life's gonna happen that is gonna slow down your ability to do a lot of things. I mean, silver lining. And some would say being, getting that much anesthetic and experiencing what you are is also a silver lining. Wouldn't necessarily say so myself, but hey, to each their own. Get the player's position. We get our current map tile. We fill in the map tiles. Yep. Map tiles. So now we're going to remove all the spawners' positions. Yeah, oh, here we go. Spawner path. So we're going 2 squares off the edge, but that's not what we're really looking for right now. seem right. What's my math? 7th square off. Oh. We're going 5 squares off the edge of the screen, but the screen's width is not that. The screen's width is half that right now because we're zoomed in at 1.5. No, we're zoomed in 20. We're not double zoomed. We're 1.5. No, that would be that would effectively be having it, wouldn't it? Math is failing me. Oh, it's Mason and Sherbet there. Little sweethearts. Sherbet is actually pretty snuggly. He is comfy, like laying with another cat. Sammy is willing to, but more from a perspective of Sammy does not care if you're in her way. She will try to shove in there. Sky can be a bully. One way or another. It can be like a friendly, like, I'm gonna, you're gonna get a bath kind of snuggle up. It can be the, I'm going to snuggle with you, but I'm going to use you as a pillow, more like. And he can also play rough. So there's only a couple of them that tolerate that from him for very long. But he will tolerate like proximity from any of them. You don't see a lot of that from Mason, and Ember will not tolerate it at all, except from Sky. Sammy walks near her, she's out. Sherbet or Mason, she's out. So it's not 1080p. We're multiplying what we're seeing by equivalently 0.5, I think. Yeah. Okay. We're going to do a little test here. By 4. Then we're going to go... No, we just need to go a little bit in left and right. I don't think we really need screen edge. Yeah. Let's leave that alone. Actually, let's change these values. Change my mind. Change my mind. One of these times I'll remember the keystroke for that. So instead, this is going to be, let's see. 8 times square adjust. This will be 5 times square adjust. Okay, they should all be spawning really tight in, but they're not. Math is off. This is off the screen, but this is... player position plus... Why? Let's go into our game scene here. Oh. Bubbles are being wiped out almost immediately. Okay, we're going to need to zoom out and see what's going on. They're spawning way further out than they should. Way out here. That's not right. That's well within the kill zone. Oh. It's not square adjust, it's... This is what we want. We're going to have to figure out some math to make it so that we can adjust the camera side, the camera scale, while accounting for that in the off-screen. Like, we need to calculate what will be off-screen based on the camera scale. Or the camera zoom. Then we can adjust the kill zone and similar accordingly. Okay, we ran over, but I think that's good. We made some more progress. So, all right. We did a lot of physics adjustment. I think we found our root cause, and it really is we found the general cause for the latency that we were seeing, and that's that we were trying to spawn too many things at once. And if we can deal with that, if we can mitigate that, if we can keep that number very low, then we don't need any async song and dance. Well, hopefully next time you want to watch, you won't be so incapacitated. Asynchronous function calls. So we're essentially taking a thing that we want to do and saying, get to this in a little bit. How we're doing all of this right now is when the physics tick happens, we're saying, make sure all of this happens. So that's why we've got those spikes during the physics tick. But if we want to, ultimately, for further tuning, we can go into that and say, handle all of these during the idle. So in all of the time between each physics tick, handle it. So instead of having to try to do it as fast as possible every 10th of a second or something like that, instead we go in and say, all right, handle it over the course of that 10th of a second. So instead of spiking really hard, ideally it would trickle it over. It doesn't seem like that's what's happening. So we might be able to fiddle with some other stuff to make it do that. But ultimately, I think we're in a decent spot right now. Especially if we handle some things like multiple individuals with their own physics handling. That can further break up the logic, I think. So we'll see. Once again, we didn't get to what I thought we were going to get to at the beginning, but we still made progress. And physics progress is really what we want to handle. We want to use up as little processing power doing the back end of the game as possible, because the screen is going to be flooded with stuff happening constantly. Yeah. So next time, if I remember, what we'll do is we'll go in and try to add some constants to calculate where the edge of the screen will be based on what we know about the ratio of how many pixels off the screen we need to be. Because we don't even need to be operating based on squares. We just need to be operating based on the assumption that a mob will be no bigger than 4 squares. Let's say 3 by 3. So if we have a gap of 3 squares off the screen, 3 squares wide or tall, then we can fit a mob there without the player seeing it before it enters the screen. And then past that, let's say with a square of wiggle room, we could have the mob kill zone. And that's as tight as we'd want it to be. So that we absolutely minimize the number of projectiles that actually exist. The mob kill zone where it is kind of okay, but I do think it needs to be tighter in. We could ensure that it's only one screen out kind of thing. We'll see, though. We'll see. In the interim, I do hope that everybody had a good time watching today. If you did, and you haven't yet, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, that kind of thing. All of those will help the algorithms determine what kind of things you like, and maybe you'll see more of my streams. I hope you do. All that said, have a good rest of your day, folks. And again, hope to see you next time.